before I jump into some of the issues on PPP and EIDL, I did want to run through just two quick little good news stories for Livingston Parish. Number one, we just announced a couple of days ago $40 million, $40 million for Livingston Parish schools, and that's for reconstruction following the flood in 2016. Southside, Springs, so really excited that that's moving forward. And I got to do a quick little just kind of end zone dance for a minute. You know, we were working with the previous superintendent, been working with the current superintendent, and Buddy Mincy and Rogers Pope and others. There was an issue where FEMA was trying to charge Livingston Parish schools about $17 million in what they were calling a deductible. And we know what that is. If you've got to pay if you have to pay FEMA $17 million, that's $17 million that's coming out of teaching and schools and teachers and facilities. And it took us a little longer than we had hoped, but ultimately we're able to change the law. And so what was going to be substantially less money, it was going to be about $23 million, ended up being $40 million because we worked with the school board and were able to get the law changed. And so that award went from $23 million to $40 million because of the law change. And really excited because, as I said, that's all about the investment in our kids' education. And I love that all that has come to fruition. Secondly, Co-Meet project that I know has been on folks' minds, not for months or years, but decades now. And we were able to secure full funding, nearly $400 million for the project about a year and a half ago. And even though we were able to get that much money for the project, I know a lot of people were really, including myself, were skeptical that this thing was really going to move forward, and really excited that just yesterday, the first major construction contract was issued. And so $55 million construction contract issued, the first major construction contract. It does include some digging or excavation. And just to remind you, that project diverts water from the Co-Meet River and takes it over to the Mississippi River, therefore giving the Co-Meet and the A-Meet more capacity and prevents flooding in Livingston, EBR, and Ascension. So a couple little good news things there. But Todd, to jump on to Paycheck Protection Program, y'all are aware what the program was designed to do, and you're right, Todd. On March 27th, the president signed that legislation into law. The program did not exist. Prior to that, there was no model. It didn't exist. And within 1 week, Treasury and SBA stood up this loan program. Within 14 days, the SBA and Treasury issued more loans than the SBA had issued over the previous 14 years. So in 14 days, gave more loans than SBA did under 14 years, which is really just remarkable. Yes, there are imperfections. I'd say that the program probably helped address issues, or at least throw a lifeline to 80 to 90% of the applicants. But as we know, there are folks who just didn't fit the model for one reason or another. So we've been continuing to work to try to fix it. So just yesterday, we did pass a bill through the House that I'm excited about, but Todd, I'm guessing you and April and others are going to say that it is a little bit too late, or a little bit later than it should have been. And you're right. We've been trying to negotiate these fixes now for weeks. Unfortunately, Congress has been very schizophrenic in regard to when we're actually going to DC and voting. And it's just been how you can make a pandemic partisan. I have no idea, but somehow they figured it out. And so there have been all these partisan fights going on. An 1,800-page bill trying to spend $3 trillion was introduced without anyone's input in Congress. So just really unfortunate things happening. But we passed a bill yesterday, and it does 5 things. Number one, instead of the 2-year maturity at the 1% interest rate on the Paycheck Protection Program, it extends the maturity for 5 years. So if there is a component of your loan that is not forgiven, you have 5 years to pay it back instead of just 2 years, but the interest rate will remain at 1%. Number two, many of you have told us that the 8-week time frame, and as you know, it's 8 weeks from your origination, from the receipts of the funds, 8 weeks from there until when that period ends, or there's some flexibility they granted about aligning with your payroll periods. But effectively, you have to, under the existing rules, you have to spend 75% of the money on payroll in order for your loan to be forgiven. During the 8-week period, that clock starts ticking the day you get your draw. We expanded that to 24 weeks. So it now, well, under the bill we passed in the House, which is going to the Senate, it will be expanded to 24 weeks. I do think, I can't say for certain the Senate will keep it at 24 weeks, but I do feel pretty confident that the Senate agrees with us and that there will be an extension beyond just the 8-week time frame that I know many of you have asked for. Number 3, the bill provides more flexibility on the use of funds. And so let me just clarify that. As you know, there are 4 eligible uses of funding that are forgivable. It is payroll, it is mortgage interest, it is rent, and utility cost. And so many of you have said that the 4 categories are pretty good, but where you run into challenges is that your ability to pay 75% of that loan during the 8-week period is hard, because either you can't get your employees to come back, you're still under some type of stay-home order, so your business can't fully operate. And Jeremy, I need to go visit your business because I got a mullet right now. So it's difficult to get your businesses open because again, stay-home orders or that business, that type of industry is not really revving yet. It's not running at previous capacity yet. And so what we've done under the bill is provided some flexibility to where those 4 categories that I mentioned, again, payroll, rent, mortgage interest, and utilities, are still the eligible forgivable categories, but we gave more flexibility on that 75%. So instead of being required to hit 75% payroll, you would have more flexibility there. Now, I want to say something that I think is important, just a quick note. Look, the objective of this program is to allow you all to keep paying employees. And so I do think that needs to remain the top focus, even if we allow you flexibility to go from 75% to a lower percentage on payroll. But this really is designed to help continue paychecks flowing. But we understand that you can cut a paycheck, but if you can't fund other aspects of your business, you're going to end up closing your business after 8 weeks, so that doesn't do any good. So that's why we provided that flexibility there. We recognize that the employee targets, and as you may recall, you're supposed to hit your target for the, so if you had, I'll make up a number, 11 employees during your 12-month payroll calculation, your previous 12-month payroll calculation, you're supposed to get back to 11 employees in order to have a forgivable loan. Well, because many of you have run into problems with having your employees come back because they're making more money off of unemployment, or they've got issues at home with someone sick or children out of school or what have you, you can't get your number back to 11. And so we've provided some more flexibility there under the legislation and effectively give you to the end of the calendar year to hit that target. And then lastly, there was an either or in the CARES Act that was done in late March, where it said that you could either take a PPP loan or you could have a deferral on your payroll taxes for 1 year, then have 2 years after to pay them back. And so we clarified in the law that you can actually have both. So you can have both a Paycheck Protection Program loan and you can defer your payroll taxes for 1 year and then have 2 years to pay back. So those are the 5 components of the PPP flexibility bill that did pass the House yesterday. I do expect the Senate to take it up and give some flexibility based on what those 5 things have done through the House. And we'll certainly keep you posted on progress there. And I know that many folks' 8-week clock is about to run out. So just to be clear, under the law, you can stick with your original terms and say, all right, look, I'm just going to stick with the 8 weeks. Or under our bill, you could opt to have the 24-week period. To go to the second bill, there was a second bill called the Truth Act. And I love when they come up with these great names like Truth Act or Heroes Act or Affordable Care Act. But in any case, this one's called the Truth Act. And what it did is it was designed to address actually one real problem, and it's kind of a technical issue, but potentially when the PPP program runs out of money, the 7A or Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program could similarly have to stop. And for some reason, they were coupled in the law and they shouldn't be. So there was one provision that decoupled those that allowed the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program to continue. Quick background on that one. That is a loan program that is supposed to allow you to borrow up to $2 million at 3.75% interest for businesses, 2.75 for not-for-profits. And it's designed for operating expenses, things outside the confines largely of the PPP. And so the programs are really complementary. You have one that funds your payroll and rent and others. The other one can fund some of your operations and helping you get equipment or food if you're a restaurant or what have you to get it operating again. And so they really are complementary. The EIDL loan program has been, in my opinion, a complete disaster. They have only issued 10% of the loans that the PPP has issued. And the difference is that under the Paycheck Protection Program, your local bank, credit union, and lender, there are over 5,000 of them in the United States that are actually issuing those loans. The EIDL loan program, SBA has decided to keep it in-house. Well, look, this is an unprecedented global pandemic. You don't have the capacity within the SBA to process these loans. And so they did do one good move, and they brought in Rocket Mortgage to help them process some of the advances or the early grant payments. And so those have really taken off, but the actual loans are continuing to drag. So I fought a bill yesterday that was designed to just do some window dressing. It was window dressing. It was naming and shaming companies. It was doing this diversity analysis, all on the EIDL program and some on the PPP. But I said, look, this doesn't fix the EIDL loan program. Why are we doing reports and studies? We need to come in and make fundamental changes to make this program work. My personal opinion, if we don't fix the EIDL loan program that gives you operating capital, then it's going to jeopardize the billions of dollars we're spending on PPP. It's just going to delay the amount of time that your business has to close. And so we're working. We killed the bill, thankfully, but I got an agreement from the chairwoman of the committee that we are sitting down, and I hope even today, sitting down to try and negotiate a fix to the EIDL loan program to allow it to quickly get capital out there and process these applications to you all. So I guess lastly, Todd, just the future. We've done 4 bills so far. I do think we're probably going to do one more major bill that's going to be more of a recovery bill. What we've done so far is testing, unemployment, stimulus checks, PPP, EIDL loan, but that's largely kind of helping us sustain as we hit rock bottom. And I think what's important next is that now that we've hit rock bottom with unemployment and economic activity, we've got to chart that course out of this ditch that we're in, and we've got to chart the path to economic recovery. And I think that includes making strategic investments in businesses, re-establishing our supply chain, our raw materials, our manufacturing back in the United States. Stop subjecting ourselves to the whims of China and other countries that don't share our values, as was exposed here. In this pandemic, we've got to make sure we have more control over our own needs in the United States. And so making strategic investments in infrastructure and reseeding that supply and manufacturing right here in the United States, I think are some of the key components of that we're going to be working on. But this is a process where I hope April, Todd, and others, we can get your feedback and suggestions as to what we need to do to specifically focus on Louisiana businesses and helping you all recover. Over.
Hey, thank you for that great summary. So one of the questions we have is, do you have to maintain the employee numbers the entire duration of the loan, or do you just have to get back to that number by the end of the tax quarter?
So under the bill, you actually have to the end of the calendar year to hit the target. So that is gonna, I think that one is probably gonna be a little bit in flux in terms of negotiations with the Senate. In April, I'm gonna just quickly address a tangent issue. you all have seen the 11-page forgiveness application. We're concerned that many of you are going to have to hire a CPA or an attorney to help you fill it out. I know that many of you, that's just a really expensive endeavor there. We joined, we worked with a congressman from Kentucky, and we just sent a letter with dozens of signatures asking them to reduce it for any loan $350,000 and below, which is the first tier, 93% of the loans. We've asked them to convert that to a one-page forgiveness document that's more so like a 1040 EZ form. And so we are pushing them. And if they don't do that, we may even try and legislate on it to where we can simplify the forgiveness for those of you that have smaller businesses.
Got it. We have a question from Michael. That seeing that transportation is an expense that is allowed in what is eligible for forgiveness. Does this include mileage reimbursement? I'm sure you can read
as I recall, it includes your fuel cost, but April, what I'm going to do, just because I don't want to give you inaccurate information, there is a guidance document that specifically talks about this. So let me get that to you. I'll get you the specific paragraph, Paul, if you can just make a note. I believe it covers fuel costs, but don't quote me. Let me grab that document or that paragraph. We will send it to you as soon as we get off this call, and that way you can blast it out to your folks. But yes, that is considered a utility cost under the PPP.
Gotcha. We're also on Facebook Live right now. So within the group, I have a question. One of them is, and it may not be directly on PPP, but do you know if Trump is pausing the HB1 visa process this year, trying to sponsor a Southeastern student that just graduated, and they're telling them the program will be put on hold?
Yeah, so there has been talk about pausing the A and B visa programs, and we know that, you know, and the reason, just a little bit of background. First of all, having folks coming in from other countries in some cases, especially countries that have high concentrations of coronavirus cases, is concerning because we don't want to, you know, sort of reseed these pods of coronavirus like we saw happen in New York and then Mardi Gras, and of course having the disproportionate number of cases in New Orleans area, capital region, as a result of that. So that's been, there is talk of pausing that. In addition, some of the consulates and other embassy facilities in other countries have been closed and not allowing visitors to come in. You have to have an interview in many cases before you're allowed to have a visa from some countries. And also some of the guest worker programs under the A&B program, they're looking at putting additional restrictions there because, as you know, with unemployment rates approaching 20%, in some cases, or in excess of 20% under some measure, there are folks that are really concerned about allowing foreign workers to come in when we have so many domestic jobs that are available. In some cases, that makes sense. In other cases, when you have seasonal work, like maybe peeling crawfish or working at a sugarcane mill, it's really hard to tell somebody from Louisiana, hey, we want to give you a 2-month job, and then you're going to be out again. People just don't go take those sorts of jobs. So we are working with the administration, both with Homeland Security and Department of Labor, to try to make sure that we have a balanced approach here, because we don't want to cause the Louisiana economy to be shut down because we can't get the workforce in there that actually supports American jobs.
We do have a question as well on auditing the loans and the forgiveness piece of it. So, you know, will you just have to submit the documents, or is your bank going to request them, or do the banks have their own opportunity to flex on any of that? And will we be given a form? They've been given a form, but not the time frame to submit the documentation.
Yeah, so April, it's a great question, and one of the things that is still somewhat in flux. So look, right now, current rules are that there's an 11-page document you have to submit. Any loan over $2 million will get audited, even though SBA and Treasury don't currently have the bandwidth to do it. It will get audited. Excuse me. Only those applications that send out red flags, and they haven't really identified what the criteria for the red flags are yet, will get an extensive or get any type of secondary review. What we're trying to do, and for those of you bankers that are on, we're trying to really minimize the risk to the banks, because the banks and the credit unions and the lenders, in my opinion, have just been remarkable. Over $7 billion in loans to Louisiana businesses. Nearly 70,000 businesses have been loaned money under PPP. This is great. This is an incredible success story. And to put all the liability on the banks for them to, identify fraudulent activity, it really goes, in my opinion, beyond their expertise and really their liability there. So we're trying to simplify the form, allow for it to be submitted to SBA and Treasury, and let them identify the red flags. But at this point, the rules today are you fill out the 11-page form and send it into your bank. And at this point, much of the responsibility is on the bank, but we're trying to get all that clarified and get the liability eliminated largely for the banks, unless there was some type of gross negligence involved on the part of the bank.
Good deal.
But again, April, this process is going to continue changing, so we will get you the information as it finalizes.
Good deal. Did y'all have something else? I've got you unmuted, Todd, right now.
While you read Trey's question, I'll ask Congressman one more. Congressman, I think between the SBA's interim final rules that were issued over the weekend between the SBA and the Treasury Department, and then your information here on the PPP Flex Act, I think a lot of the questions are probably going to be maybe not answered, but at least we have a lot more guidance. And you've really hit one of the nails on the head with the forgiveness application. I think your proposal is going to be very well received if we can get that down to a one-page thing. One question, though, as April reads that next question, you kind of piqued my interest in what you said Congress is going to be working on next. What types of investment in businesses, without you having to be too specific, do you envision?
Todd, so let me go back and just say, when you look at some of the lessons learned from this, the fact that we were largely just subject to the whims of China for protective equipment, for pharmaceuticals, we have got to pull our supply chain and our manufacturing back to the United States. It is not from an economic security, from a national security perspective, it is not in U.S. interest for us to cede those activities to other countries. I think we're going to run into some headwinds because in some cases for raw materials, you have to mine and you have people that are opposed to mining, but the reality is mining is going to happen. It's either going to happen in the United States or it's going to happen in other countries. And we actually do things safer here than virtually anywhere else in the world. So what we're talking about is one, making some changes to our regulatory rules, helping to put tax incentives and other investments, direct business investments in place to help to lure or pull some of those activities back to the United States. And we need to be strategic about the types of manufacturing and the types of supply chains that we're pulling back to the United States. Look, one example of that, Todd, is what we've done, and it's largely been a result of regulatory practices been done under the Trump administration for energy. We went from decades ago being the majority of our energy being imported into the United States to effectively, and you can come up with different calculations, but effectively being a net exporter of energy, the largest energy producer in the world. And this has been huge, and it's largely been a result of our regulatory changes that have been done under the Trump administration. And so I do think that you can see you can cause additional growth and pulling back some of that offshoring of activities in the United States through regulatory changes and through direct investments and tax incentives to businesses. But also I mentioned the infrastructure investments as well. I think it's really important. Instead of paying people to stay home through unemployment, let's create jobs where people can actually work, and then we can end up with having something as a result, like improvements to our traffic problems in the capital region, which are obviously plaguing economic or preventing economic growth in our region. But one other quick thing. I think that all of us recognize that pre-COVID and post-COVID, things are going to be different. I think that even things like this, Zoom meetings are probably going to be happening a bit more. This has probably had some permanent changes or disruptions to our supply chain. I think people are going to do more online business as they've done during COVID. And so that changes your supply lines. So related to your intermodalism, the boats and the airplanes and the trucks and rail and how things move around. Louisiana, and in April, I've said this at probably every chamber meeting y'all had, but I just think it's so important. We have 5 of the top 15 ports. We have one of 2 places in America that has 6 Class 1 rail lines. Other states would give an arm and a leg for those things. And we are the intermodal hub for the nation. And I think that we need to be thinking about, with these supply chains and the intermodalism changes that are going to be happening as a result of more online businesses and moving more manufacturing and supply chains domestically, what do we need to do in Louisiana to make sure that we are well positioned to take advantage of, or to, again, be ready for being a key leader in that changes in supply chain to where we can benefit from it at home?
I think those are great points, by the way. We get taught that all the time in our industry. Trey, I did unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hey, good morning, Garrett. Thanks for joining us this morning. I know everybody's worried about the PPP loans right now, but the expenses related to the PPP loans, the forgiveness piece, those expenses that will be forgiven at some point. Right now, I believe the way it's set up is that those expenses, you won't be able to deduct them on your tax return. This is later on down the road.
Okay, so you're talking about, so for example, if you got a PPP loan that covered payroll and then that was forgiven, so then you can't deduct payroll, is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Yeah, so first, the law, the CARES Act that created PPP, it was silent on that. That was an interpretation that IRS came up with later. We have been in discussion on trying to get that clarified in law. Some people believe that the interpretation is flawed, or at least the administration has more flexibility in how they have interpreted that. So there's some folks that are working with the IRS that come up with a different interpretation. There are also some legislative efforts. Like right now, all I can tell you with any degree of certainty is that it is something that is being discussed, but there absolutely is not consensus right now on how that would work. But I will keep you posted as we move forward on this. I think that on this one, we probably have a little bit more time on it. I know that it's, y'all want as much certainty and visibility as possible, but with us meeting so sporadically right now, it's been really hard for us to try and negotiate fixes because we're not together. And even if we do Zoom meetings and others, it's not as functional as us having a regular schedule where we're in Washington 4 days a week. And so it is something. We've got a list of about probably 25 things, April, including making sure chambers are eligible for PPP. And so this is one of the things that's on our list, and we certainly will keep you posted on how things progress there.
Well, good deal. We'd love to see that. So Jeremy has a question. Instead of me reading it, I went ahead and unmuted him so he can ask you directly.
Hi, Garrett. Thanks for being on today. And I, too, am growing a mullet I haven't been able to get a haircut yet. So been too busy trying to get people back to work, which is some of my question here. The hot button ticket in the retail industry is obviously the expanded unemployment insurance benefits. Do you feel that will be extended past July 31st? And if so, will there be fixes in there to assure that people will not be eligible for more money than they were making before the law was passed?
Yeah, so Jeremy, great question. And the fact that the CARES Act actually effectively provided people a raise for not working is just mind-boggling. And we've created a perverse incentive where folks are actually not choosing to go to work because they can make more money by staying home. I mean, it's crazy. It It doesn't make any sense. And so what's happened is that there was a bill that Speaker Pelosi introduced that gave the ability for the unemployment to be extended through the end of December. But obviously, we think that's problematic. And as many of you have had trouble getting your employees to come back because they're sitting there saying, wait a minute, I can make $847 a week by staying home, or I can make $700 a week by going to work for you. I'm choosing home. And so a few things. That bill is not going anywhere. It will not see the light of day in the Senate. Number two, I do believe that there are going to be continued efforts to expand unemployment. My 2 cents is if this is rock bottom and this is where we are now with regard to unemployment, what we need to be doing is quickly as possible, again, charting the course out of here back up to economic activity where we were before COVID. And I think that what keeping unemployment through December does is it actually makes it comfortable for us to stay here at high unemployment rates. It's the wrong direction. I could not be more philosophically opposed to doing that. So because Pelosi is Speaker and obviously wields a big gavel here, I do think she's going to push it. I think that there's a chance that it gets extended, but Jeremy, I think if it gets extended, we're going to have a few conditions on there. Number one is going to be that there will be a calculation to your pre-COVID income levels, meaning you're not going to profit. You're not going to profit from being unemployed. Number two, in Louisiana, it's called Form 77. In other states, they have different names for it. But if you offer someone a job back, then they are ineligible for unemployment. But there's not an appropriate enforcement mechanism. And again, in Louisiana, there's something called Form 77 you can fill out that says I've offered them the job back, and that should make that person ineligible for unemployment. But again, the enforcement mechanism, in fact, I think the governor might have even said they're not going to enforce it. That's wrong. We should not be allowing for people to stay home on the taxpayer's dime whenever businesses are trying to get operating again and get some level of economic activity reestablished. So if it's extended, which I think there's a chance, but I don't think through the end of December, I do think you'll have those two conditions on there. Better enforcement of making someone ineligible and making them pay back whenever they are offered a job back and they stay on unemployment. And number two, having an income calculation to make sure they don't profit from unemployment.
That would have made sense. We all wondered about that in the beginning. It's like, wow, you're getting paid more. Tough call on that. I know things like we all said and moved really fast. So, and trying to get the money out. I think you addressed the Form 70 question that's here. So I'm opening it up to anyone else who has anything that they'd like to ask you. So you ready to be there like 5 days a week now, or what? You miss it?
There's a lot of work to be done. I mean, y'all know it. There is. This is a big deal. I mean, and the fact, this isn't just the 2016 flood or Hurricane Katrina. I mean, this is global, and it really is amazing looking at the consequences of stay-home orders. Because look, if we have stay-home order in the United States, it's going to create an economic void. Voids get filled, and they're going to get filled by other countries. I said this a few times, and I have absolutely no data to back it up, but I believe it. I think for every day we're shut down, it's going to take us 2 and 3 weeks for each day to recover. And we have got to get reestablish some degree of normalcy as quickly as possible, because it is going to cause exponential recovery time for every day we stay closed. And it is not in Louisiana's interest. It's not in U.S. interest, and other countries will fill the void.
I agree. I think so too. I think face masks are a big controversy right now too. You like wearing one?
No, I can't stand it. But I will say I do it when I'm in densely populated areas. I just it's looking at the pros and cons. No, I can't stand it, but I do it anyway because it's just not worth it.
Guess it's better to wear it if it's.
I got a good American flag one now, not the.
We gotta have some cool ones. We kept on saying and then we were watching to see how people were receptive to wearing them or not. And anyway, there's definitely some fights going on about them.
Well, the funny thing, I don't know if you're ever bored enough to watch the House chamber, but the Speaker of the House will be up there wearing a mask whenever there's no one within 10 feet of him or her, and so that one, and you can't understand what they say,
right?
And so that one I think is more for aesthetic purposes, but again, when you're in close proximity, it's not worth it. And if it can help us to prevent spread and get the economy open back up faster, then I'll sacrifice it, as much as I hate them.
Yep.